balance, fulfillment, and joy. I'm Kayla Sweet, and together we're going to have fun and create change from the inside out. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. Welcome back. I am excited to be bringing you a solo episode today. It's been a little while since I've just hopped on and shared my thoughts, and I've had a lot of things spinning lately that I wanted to share, and I think this is actually a topic that many of you will relate to and will benefit from hearing my mental processes on. So I'm just going to give you a brief episode today that I'm really hoping you will take as an invitation to do some exploration for yourself. So I know sometimes people listen while they are driving or walking or doing the dishes or the laundry or whatever it might be. And that's completely fine. If that's the case, then you can think through some of the questions I'm going to ask. But if you have the luxury of grabbing a pen and a piece of paper or taking notes on your computer or your phone, I would really encourage you to do that with this episode, because I'm going to be sharing some things about my journey and my perspectives, but I'm also going to be really encouraging you to dig into your own life and to make sense of some of these things for yourself. So this is a really fun opportunity for you to do some self-reflection alongside me and to pause the podcast as needed to take notes and be with your own thoughts. So with that being said, today's topic is balance, business, and success. These might seem like contradictory terms, but I really think that they can go together beautifully. And that's what I want to talk about, because we hear about balance a lot. It's something I talk about a lot. It's something that we see on social media, and everyone has their own spin, their own ideas as to what this means and how we get it and what matters and what it looks like. And then we have these other ideas of business and of success. And I think sometimes when we're thinking about these terms, we hold balance on one hand and things like success and business and entrepreneurship and financial stability on another hand. We act as though these are separate entities that aren't really related. And that's just not how being human works. We have all of these various components of our lives that are showing up simultaneously. It's all happening at once. And I think part of why we are so disconnected and so tired as a culture is because we haven't figured out how to bridge the gaps between some of these things. So I think about this a lot, and it's something I'm going to share with you today as far as how I approach balance, business, and success in a way that feels sustainable and fulfilling for me. And then I want you to think about ways that you can do this for yourself. And regardless of if you work in the corporate world, or if you work in food service, or you work in a factory, or you work in healthcare, or you work at home raising your children, or you have an entrepreneurship mindset and you have your own business, or you're starting to create a venture that is uniquely your own. It doesn't matter what types of roles you walk through and walk in to get benefit from this. It doesn't matter if you are early in your career, if you are mid-career, if you are retirement, if you are anti-career. The things we are going to talk about today are relevant regardless, because like I said, we're going to make this personal and applicable to you. We're going to make this something that you can relate to in a way that feels authentic and meaningful in your life. So my goal for this time we have together today is to really explore these topics and to help you get some clarity on them in your own life. So, I'm going to provide some evidence based strategies because I think it's useful to know what works when it comes to creating balance in your life and to feel like you're being successful in your life. I'm also going to be sharing some of my own steps, the things that have happened on my own journey. And I want to explore all of the paradoxes that come when we talk about balance and success or balance in business, because there's a lot of tension within these concepts. And there's also a lot of tension between discipline and flow and discipline and grace. There's things that feel like they are opposing forces that we really have to learn to hold together to achieve this, I believe. So I want to invite you to grab a pen and some paper so that you can really reflect on these things as we go today. So to start, I want to talk about success and what that means. A lot of the people I work with, both in my consulting work and in my coaching work, are high achieving, high performing people who really want to succeed, whatever that means to them. They want to succeed and achieve, but not at the cost of their health, not at the cost of their family and their relationships. And that can feel like a really heavy lift. It can feel really challenging. So I want to talk about what success is, and the big question we need to ask when it comes to this is, how do you define success? How do you define it? We all grapple with this idea of what it means to be successful, and sometimes that looks like freedom, time freedom, financial freedom. Sometimes it looks like flexibility to do the kind of work we want wherever and whenever feels good for us. Sometimes it means impact. How many lives can we touch or change or improve? Sometimes it means space, to be slow, and the ability to have time to ourselves and to our families. Sometimes it means raising a family and managing all of the pieces of a household. Success is so different based on what you want and need from your unique life. So I don't think we can land on one definition for success. I think we each have to define it for ourselves. And I also think we have to be open to that definition evolving throughout our lives as we grow, as we move into different stages and phases of our lives. Success isn't always going to mean the same thing to us as it once did. So for me, right now, this current iteration of my life, success is really about challenging myself to learn and grow and experience new things while prioritizing play, the relationships that matter to me, and healthy habits and routines for my mind, body, and soul. So that's kind of a mouthful. But essentially, I know I'm being successful if I'm being challenged, if I'm experiencing new things, and if I'm having fun and spending time with the people that matter while taking care of myself. So for me, I really try to take a curious and experimental approach to my life. I like to think of work and business and success and the landscape of my life as a playground, as a place to test things out and to try new things. And the truth is, I'm somebody that, as I've dreamed up something and wondered what would it be like to do that, I often just do it. I often just give it a try. Sometimes it goes really well and sometimes it doesn't, but I allow myself to stay curious. A question I asked myself many years ago was, what would it be like to have a podcast? And here I am. I've asked myself, what would it be like to run my own business? And now I do. I've asked myself what it would be like to work in different departments and organizations, to serve as a consultant, to serve as a learning expert, to serve as a coach internally. How can those things impact the landscape? And so I've tried and explored and continue to explore all of these different realms within my work. But I've also asked myself questions like, what would it be like to learn to draw in oil pastels? Or what would it be like to make bracelets and give each of them a meaning, give each of them like an inspirational quote? And that is something that I do as one of my hobbies. What would it be like to read a lot of nonfiction books? So you can see that this can go in any direction in your life. What would it be like to plant a garden, to learn to make things grow and be beautiful and thrive? What would it be like to have a thriving community of women that I'm surrounded by? What would it be like to be married, to have a life partner? These are all questions that we can ask ourselves curiously and playfully and intentionally. And that's how I live my life. I allow myself to dream a lot and to wonder a lot and to be curious. And if there's something that I'm curious about that feels like it's within reach, I just try it. I just give it a try and see what happens. And I think when you allow yourself to be curious without putting a lot of pressure on it, it makes things feel more fun and more playful and less scary. There's less pressure around it when the point is to see, to have fun, to explore, rather than to perfect and to get everything right out the gate. But the most important part of all of this is that my definition of success, how I think about it and choose to work with it in my life, is not going to be the same as yours. It shouldn't be. Gosh, can you imagine how boring things would be if we all defined success the same and we all did the same things, we all looked the same and wore the same clothes? Gosh, that would be a boring life to live. So my ask of you is to think, what does success mean to you? How do you define it? What matters in your life? So I want you to take a moment, and if you are able to, grab that piece of paper or your phone or wherever you're going to take notes. And I've got a few questions for you that I want you to spend some time exploring. And I'm going to give you the questions, and I'm going to encourage you to pause the podcast and actually spend some time reflecting on these. If you're not able to do that, that's okay. You can think through them. You can take note of what time it is on the podcast and return to the questions later and do some journaling or some meditation on these questions, whatever feels best for you to practice. If you're a creative person, maybe you could make a collage or a drawing or a poem reflecting on these questions. But here they are. I want you to think about what matters most to you. So that's the first question. What matters most? The next question is, what do you want your life to look like? What kinds of things do you want in your life? What people do you want in your life? How do you want to feel in your life? In your heart, in your mind, in your energy levels? What are the non-negotiable things that you need to feel fulfilled? What are those things that if you don't have them built in somewhere, you know you're not going to feel fulfilled, successful, happy? What are those? how will you know that you're successful? How will you measure it? How will you make sense of it when it comes? Will you know? If not, maybe you need to do some clarifying. And finally, I want you to think about, how are you already successful? In what ways are you already living out your goals, values, dreams, and aspirations? Because even if you want to do new things or different things or more things, I think there's a lot of value in recognizing that if you're aligning your daily actions, you are already successful, and there should be some gratitude and appreciation and awe and wonder around that, around what you already have, around what you're already doing, around the people that already love you. It's not always about going for the next thing. Sometimes success is recognizing that we've already achieved quite a bit of success, that we already have a very beautifully, fully lived life. So take a moment and think about those questions. Okay, so hopefully you were able to pause, but if not, that's okay too. I want to talk a little bit about what those questions I prompted you to think about really mean to me. So for me, I like to center my actions, my choices, my life around my values. So I've spent a lot of time doing values work, really trying to define what things I want to filter all of my life decisions through. And my top 3 values are love, learning, and connection. And when I'm thinking about my own success, I'm asking myself questions like, am I making the time for the people and the things that I love? Am I growing and evolving? Am I doing things with love? Am I being loving in my approach? Am I being challenged? Am I open to learning and to being wrong? Am I staying connected to myself? Am I staying connected to the earth? Am I staying connected to my community, to the people I love? Those are the ways that I assess my own success, because those are the things that I've self-defined, the things that matter most to me. And when I feel like I can say yes to those questions, then I feel successful, regardless of what's happening in my environment, in my roles. Those are the ways that I measure my success. And so I can feel successful while still striving for more, or for something different, or for experimentation. So I hope that example kind of helps you. And once you've spent some time thinking about what really matters most to you, and you've gotten clear on your own values, I encourage you to add some additional questions that you can ask yourself to check yourself for alignment in your life. And so with that, I want to transition a little bit to this idea of balance, because this is where things can get a little bit tricky. We so often hear about balance and talk about balance as if it's this place you need to go, where you're going to have perfect equilibrium, perfect distribution and balance between your work, with your family, with your self-care and your hobbies, and whatever else matters in your life. You think you're going to reach this destination where everything is going to be perfectly in balance, equally distributed as far as your time and energy goes. But the truth is, balance is more about alignment than equality. And there's some paradox in this. There's some paradox in our ideas and conceptions of balance that I really want to dig into a little bit. So, on one hand, I feel we need some level of discipline and structure to achieve our goals and to live in alignment with our values. There's some intentionality and some planning that has to go into this, right? Usually we don't live a super aligned life by accident. But on the other hand, we really need space for flow and ease and spontaneity and grace. We need the ability to shift and to listen to what's needed on a given day. We can't be too rigid or we'll miss those opportunities for flow. So how do we hold space for both, for discipline and structure and ease and flow, for the feminine and the masculine? And for me, it's really about our mindsets and the way that we think about these things. It's really about the way we choose to relate to these concepts and the way we choose to check ourselves for alignment. So I don't think that discipline needs to feel rigid. I actually think discipline can be a really supportive container that allows us to flow more easily and more naturally. It's interesting. It's like the stronger the container, the more discipline and structure and support we have around us, there's actually more freedom and flexibility for flow inside our lives. And that might seem counterintuitive, but without a strong container with pure flow, I mean, you're just spilling all over the place. So I think for me, it's been helpful that when I have a clear sense of my values, of my priorities, of my goals for a given time in my life, when I am disciplined enough to organize my time and to stick to routines that will help me stay in alignment, that's not restricting. It's actually empowering. It's actually liberating and freeing. Because when I have some structure around my life, I actually have a lot more freedom to be present and creative in the moment, because I'm not worrying about if I made time for something that matters, because I have a place for it. And I also have a place for flow and freedom and spontaneity. And so I'm constantly going back and forth between what do I need and want in a given day based on how I'm feeling, and what are the things that maybe I don't feel like doing right now, but are really in alignment with what I want, and I know I'm going to feel better afterwards. I know I'm going to feel like it was time well spent, because sometimes we will take the easy route in the moment, thinking it's self-care or self-love, but then afterwards we don't feel good about it. So for me, it's about a balance of both. If I'm able to be routined enough that I'm doing the things that matter, that align with my values, then on the days when I really want to do nothing, I feel pretty good in doing that. But if I were to do nothing every single day, I think that would start to make me feel a little aimless. It would start to make me feel a little disconnected from what matters to me. And again, these are my own ways of working with these ideas. So I encourage you to think of your own. But when it comes to kind of holding space for both discipline and flow, there is some research that supports this. So there was a study that was done in 2014 by Hafner et al. And this study was on time management and well-being. And time management's another topic we could get into in another time in more detail, but this is where that like discipline and routine comes in. And this research suggested that the people who practiced self-regulation and organization in their schedule and time management activities actually had higher levels of well-being, but so it's conditional. It was only when they also allowed for flexibility and spontaneity within those structures. So ultimately, it's not about rigid discipline. It's about having enough structure in your life to keep you on track and aligned and give you enough room for ease and for flow and for creativity and spontaneity. So you can kind of build flexibility and spontaneity into structures. It's the feminine and the masculine marriage. Too much of either is usually not helpful. But if we get them to work in partnership, really beautiful things can happen. This is a little bit of an oversimplification, I will say, because balance doesn't necessarily feel easy. And I think there's a lot of paradox in how we experience it and how we relate to it, because some days are really full and busy, and other days are more slow and spacious. And both are needed, both are valid, both are necessary, both are meaningful, and both are balanced if they're aligning with what's most important, what matters in that given day, in that given moment, in that given season of life. So you can write down a couple more questions and spend some time reflecting and pause if you'd like. But when it comes to discipline and flow, masculine and feminine, when it comes to creating balance within the busy and within the slow, and finding a flow that feels good for you, there's a couple questions you can ask yourself. You can ask yourself, where do you need more discipline to support your goals and values? Because if there are things you really want and you aren't taking steps towards them, you're probably feeling some frustration around that. And so maybe you need to create some life-giving structures to support you in moving towards those things. Where are those spaces where you need to up the structure a little, up the discipline? And then, on the other hand, where can you let go? Where can you allow more flow, more ease, more gentleness, more grace into your life? Where can you allow more spaciousness? Where are the places that have gotten too rigid, that feel constricting? Because that's harmful too. It's a give and a take. It's a balance of both. And it changes all the time. So for me, there are some days where I really need a lot of structure, especially when I'm trying to manage all of the things that I do. When I'm managing my work, my business, my personal responsibilities, the podcast, I need some structure around that to make sure that I'm reaching my goals and showing up in ways that are valuable for the people I'm working with. But there are also days where I need to just let go of everything and allow life to unfold as it is, and to just be and to play, or to do something I never thought I was going to do in that day, or to spend the whole day in the garden. So for me, it's really in this dance between that I find balance, because I do a lot of things and I'm somebody that likes to stay active and busy, and I like to grow and learn and evolve, and so I'm constantly taking on new challenges, and that's part of what success means to me. And within that, I also have a very strong sense of what self-care means to me and what balance means to me and what it means to nourish myself within that. And so I have to allow space for both. And I think that's really the art and the science that can allow us to have success and meaning in our lives without feeling burned out and worn down. When we're thinking about success or business, something that we have to keep in mind is our roles. It's our identities and our shifting identities. Those of you that keep up with me on Facebook or LinkedIn, you know that I wear a lot of hats. I work in organizational spaces still. I am in the learning and organizational development space in the corporate world. I run a coaching and consulting business, and I have this podcast. That sounds like a bit much for some people. That sounds like there could be a lot going on. And I think sometimes when people see and hear all of the things that I'm doing, it can seem contradictory to the message that I'm sending about balance and about burnout resilience. But it's not. It's not contradictory, because even though I am doing all of these things, I actually have more space now than I ever have for family, for friends, for leisure. And it seems counterintuitive, but I think I've become more and more effective in my work in organizations and in my business and in the podcast when I've made sure that my structure includes time for rest and play and the people I love. And that is really the beauty of life for me. It's watching the way that making more time for the things that nourish me somehow opens up time and space for me to do more without feeling tired. There are times in my life I've done a lot less and felt a lot more drained. And I think it's because of the alignment piece. If we are aligned with the things that we're doing and with the activities we're filling our lives with, they energize us rather than depleting us. But there's paradox in all of this, especially because too often we tie our sense of success and our sense of identity to work or to the roles we play or to our titles or to our businesses. And when those things change or shift, when we leave one role and step into another, when we experience a failure, when something doesn't go as planned, we can let that impact how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about our lives. So we really have to make it a priority to recognize and to believe that what we do is not who we are. No matter how many hats you wear, no matter how many roles you stand in at work and at home, that's not who you are. You are so much more complex and beautiful and alive than any role that you play or step into can capture. Those are things we get to try on. Our roles are things we get to experiment with and play with. They aren't who we are. We can shift those out and we will still remain. Our roles, our work, those are creative opportunities. Those are not measures of worth. Those are opportunities to see what you can do from a certain seat, from a certain organization, from a certain role with your family or friends. It is not a measure of how valuable you are as a human being. Your value is innate. The rest is just play. And again, when we're thinking about success, it's really about alignment. It's not about how we're doing in any given role or how we're measuring ourselves in any particular position. It's about if we are in alignment with what matters and we are spending time with who matters and we are doing things that are ultimately moving us towards what we want our life to look like. And I think it's this mindset that really helps us to avoid burnout, because we stop tying our identities up in our work. We stop tying our worth up in our busyness and our tasks and how many things we can do. And when we do this, we create more space for joy. We create more space to grow and to make meaningful connections and to learn and to be easeful, even when things aren't going the way we planned or the way we thought that they would go. So one way that I do this in my life is just really thinking of each thing that I'm doing in the world as an experiment. It's something I get to play with, something I get to learn from and evolve through. This really takes pressure off and allows me to enjoy the journey. It allows me to enjoy the process and not get lost in the results. Don't get me wrong, I want my clients to have results that impact their lives positively. I want the organizations I work with to be positively impacted by the work that I'm doing. But I know at the end of the day, regardless of the results, I'm still worthwhile as a human being. And that allows me to take chances and play and speak my voice and my opinions and my ideas, because my sense of worth isn't tied to them. It gives me freedom and flexibility, which I think actually in the end makes me more effective and have better results. But even when I misstep or I fail or things don't go the way I thought they would, because it's an experiment, it's not really a failure. It's just an opportunity to learn what might work better, what might work differently, what might be more effective. So there's some wanderings and ramblings from, my life perspective and the way I choose to live and how I'm really able to feel energized and balanced and nourished in my life, even though I do a lot of things. So I want to kind of bring this into practice for you all. I want to help you know how to take all of these concepts that we've kind of been navigating together for the last 30 minutes or so and give you some strategies to try out, things that have been helpful for me in my life and in my work, and invite you to try them on to see how these things can work for you and show up for you in your life. So I've got 5 ideas for you. The first idea is to spend some time with your values and then let them guide you. Let them be the filter through which your life decisions are made. And I always advise identifying the top 3 to 5 values, because a lot of things matter to us, but when you allow this to get too complex, it can actually become less meaningful. So this isn't to say other things don't matter. It's to say, what are the things you're going to filter all of the other stuff through? What are the containers that are going to be big enough to hold everything else for you? And allow those to be the guideposts, those values. So once you know those values, those are your anchors. Those are the things you can lean on and look to and to check yourself on when life gets busy or stressful. You can come back to these things and you can get a pretty good sense of if you are living in alignment with them or if you need to course correct. Now, when you come up with your values, I also encourage you to create actual definitions for these, for what these things mean for you in your life, because my top value is love. That could be defined in a lot of different ways to a lot of different people. But I know what it means to me. To me, it's about being loving and careful in the way that I do things. It's about approaching each task lovingly. It's about loving the person in front of me. It's about loving myself. It's about loving my life experience, even the challenges, maybe especially the challenges. That's not the way everyone looks at love, and they don't need to. So when you're defining your own values, really come up with what that means to you and how you're going to know if you're in alignment with those things in your life. Create some questions, some things you could ask yourself to check. So that's number one. Number two, really spend some time thinking about how you can balance discipline with flow. These are these paradoxes that we were talking about earlier. How can you create structures that are supportive of your goals and build freedom and flexibility into those structures? So maybe there's time for work, but there's also time for play and rest and reflection. Maybe there's time for caregiving or parenting, whatever your roles are within your family. But there's also time for you, for your creativity, for your rejuvenation. So find that discipline flow balance that feels aligned with your values, with your life, with your aspirations, with what success means to you. The third thing that you can experiment with is setting boundaries and really defining your non-negotiables. So I've got multiple episodes that talk about boundaries that you can lean on if you are getting kind of stuck in the stickiness of that. But once you've defined the non-negotiable things you want and need in your life, that can help with knowing where those lines, where those rules can be useful in order to protect the time and the energy that you want to set aside to align your life with your values, with your goals, with what matters to you. So it doesn't really matter what those non-negotiable things are. Maybe it's a certain amount of time with your loved ones. Maybe it's a certain amount of time to yourself. Maybe it's some creative and flexible space for projects that you want to do around the house, or creative endeavors or business endeavors. It doesn't matter what they are. It only matters that they align with what you want, what fills your cup, what makes you excited about your life. And those are the things you need to protect. So spend some time with that. The fourth thing you can do is to spend some time redefining busyness. Busyness, being busy, is not good and it's not bad. Being busy is neutral. Now, if you are feeling overwhelmed and stressed and depleted within the busyness of your life, there's probably an alignment problem happening, or there's a perfection problem happening, or a people-pleasing problem happening. And that's where the depletion is coming in, because the things that are filling your life aren't filling you up. So rather than assessing busyness as being a full schedule, or, having more spaciousness in your schedule, meaning that you're less busy, it doesn't really matter the cadence of your life as far as how many things are filling your day. What matters is if those things are aligned with your values, with your non-negotiables, with the things that matter to you, or if it's just filling up the space and the time of your precious life. So look at where your time is going and ask yourself if it's aligned with the life you want. And on those days that you're really busy, you don't have to frame it in such a way as, oh my gosh, I'm so busy, I'm so overwhelmed, I had no time. Well, if you were doing things you really loved that really filled you up with all that time, maybe that busyness felt beautiful. Maybe it felt nourishing. I know sometimes I have really busy days that I just love, that really excite me and energize me. So spend some time thinking about that and how you want to relate to it. What busyness could mean to you, and how much or how little of it align with your values. If you have top values of slowness and spaciousness, maybe you would want to cut back on some busyness. If you're like me, and one of the things you're assessing your life success on is that you're constantly growing and learning and being challenged, a little busyness isn't so bad. And the last piece of advice, the last practice, the last thing I want you to try is to give yourself more grace. Be gentle with yourself, with the way you speak to yourself, with the way you hold yourself accountable. Life is going to ebb and flow. There are going to be times that you feel off balance. There are going to be times where you feel overwhelmed, where life just knocks the wind out of you. And that's okay. When you are gentle with yourself and forgiving with yourself and graceful with yourself, that allows you to move through those moments compassionately and lovingly towards yourself and not get lost in judgment. Because when you start expecting perfection of yourself and being really harsh and critical of yourself, you're going to lose sight of all of this other stuff, and you are going to feel tired and depleted and bad about yourself. So regardless of the goals that you set and the ways you define success and all of this stuff we've been talking about, at the end of the day, none of it's going to matter if you're not being kind and loving to yourself within all of it. So don't forget that piece as you're exploring what all of this means to you. So I encourage you to write those 5 things down. Again, just really briefly, those were defining your values, get clear on them, and then let them guide you, let them align you. The second thing was figure out how to balance discipline with flow. Where do you need more structure? Where do you need less? The third one was set those boundaries and non-negotiables. The fourth, redefine busyness and assess if the busy in your life is aligned with the things that you want in your life. And the fifth one is practice grace. Spend some time with those, figure out what they mean to you, and how you can integrate them intentionally into your life. Those are the little nuggets of advice that I want to leave you with today. I think those were most of the thoughts that I wanted to share. And as we wrap up, I just want to remind you that all of the topics that I've talked about today, balance, business, success, these are deeply personal topics. They mean different things to each of us, and they're often incredibly paradoxical. They are nuanced and complicated, and that's kind of what makes them beautiful. It's really about defining success and balance on your own terms and staying anchored in what matters to you. Life is this beautiful invitation to learn a dance between these seemingly opposing forces, between discipline and flow, between structure and ease, between action and grace, between busyness and slowness. And you get to determine what song you want to dance to, what rate and pace you want to move at, and what relationship you want to have with these paradoxical ideas. With that, I hope that this episode has given you some clarity, some inspiration, some ideas to navigate your own path, your own life, your own journey with a little bit more ease. And I hope that you can remember that no matter how many hats you wear, or how many roles you perform, or how well you're doing in any given part of your life, all that really matters is if you are aligning yourself, your life, your actions with the things that really matter to you. Because at the end of the day, we want to live a life that's meaningful to us. And that requires quite a bit of self-definition and permission to let our lives look different than what the world might be telling us it should look like. We each have the ability to define what matters to us and how we want our lives to look. thank you so much for joining me on this ride. I really appreciate you all in this community that we've built together. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode, how you're relating with these things. If you were able to take some time and pause throughout and journal and reflect, I would love to hear if anything stood out to you, if anything clicked in place for you, if you had any aha moments. So please reach out and share these things with me on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or wherever you are connected with me outside of the podcast. You can also put comments in the podcast as well, so other people that listen can see those if you want to share them there. But I would love to hear from you and keep this conversation going. I hope there's been some seed of clarity or inspiration in my random thoughts. I'm recording this on a Sunday morning and I'm feeling very contemplative, so hopefully it was useful for you. I hope that you have a beautiful rest of your day, regardless what time it is. And I hope that you can find one thing from today's episode that you can spend some time with, really defining and reflecting and bringing into practice in your life. Until next time, take radically good care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you want more resources on thriving in your life or want details on working with me, check out my website at internallyguidedleadership.com or follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at internally guided coach. Be gentle with yourselves out there, and I'll talk to you next time.